Welcome to the virtual meeting of the full council. It's 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 29th of September 2020. My name is Councillor Linda Eden and I am the Mayor and Chair of this meeting. And my fellow councillor, Councillor Lily Kaufman, is a Deputy Mayor and Vice Chair. In accordance with the regulations made under Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this remote meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The audio-visual recording will also be made available on the Council's website and YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. All meeting participants are reminded to speak slowly and clearly in the direction of their device's microphone at all times. A reminder that mobile phones and other electronic devices should be turned off or put on silent mode. And those participating in the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. For the purpose of recording of attendance, I can confirm that the following councillors are present and participating in this remote meeting. Councillor Rosemary Adams, Councillor Naveed Alam, Councillor Lee Bentley, Councillor Bill Bolter, the Leader of the Council, John Boyce, Councillor Linda Broadley, Councillor Frank Broadley, Councillor David Carter, the Deputy Leader of the Council, Michael Charlesworth, Councillor Lateef Dar, myself, Linda Eden, Councillor Robert Eaton, Councillor Dean Gamble, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Gatoria, the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Joshi, the Deputy Mayor, Lily Kaufman, Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman, Amandeep Kaur, Councillor Claire Kozlowski, Councillor Helen Lloydell, Councillor David Lloydell, Councillor Kevin Lloydell, Councillor Richard Morris and Councillor Ian Ridley. We also have the following officers in attendance. Samuel Ball, Anne Court. Has Dave Gill joined the meeting yet? I can't see whether he's here or not.
He has, Your Worship.
Thank you. Dave Gill, Stephen Hines, Adrian Thorpe, Stephen Tucker and Philippa Fisher. For the purposes of the regulations, that I can confirm that before this remote meeting went live, all participants confirmed that they can see and or hear all the other participants. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the Council's adopted remote procedure rules, a summary of which is attached to tonight's agenda for reference. May I also politely remind all participants that they must not act in a disorderly or disruptive manner or otherwise interfere with the Council's proper conduct of its business. Thank you. So we'll go straight to the item, the agenda. A webinar has been sent to all members and officers for this meeting. A direct link to the live stream of the meeting's proceedings on the Council's YouTube channel is below. A summary of the remote meeting procedures rule to be adopted for the meeting is attached for reference. Agenda item 1, calling to order of the meeting. Agenda item 2, apologies of absence. Are there any apologies of absence?
Thank you, Your Worship. We've received apologies this evening from Councillor Samia Hack and Councillor Sharon Morris.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any, members are reminded that any declaration of interest should be made having regard to the members' code of conduct. In particular, members must make clear the nature of the interest and whether it is pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Councillor Charlesworth, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I run a mobile food business on the Oby Industrial Estate, which is within one of the documents tonight. Mr. Gill will decide, I suppose it's pecuniary or personal. I don't know, one or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charlesworth.
I'll just say that as far as I'm concerned, that's a personal interest and it won't prevent Councillor Charlesworth from taking part in the debate or voting.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Minutes of the previous meeting. To read, confirm and sign the minutes of the previous meeting in accordance with Rule 19 of Part 4 of the Constitution. Can those be approved? So as nobody's got their hand up, can I take it that's okay to proceed? Thank you. Action list arising from the previous meeting. There was no action list arising from the previous full council meeting. Agenda item 6, motions on notice. To consider any motions on notice in accordance with Rule 14, Part 4 of the Constitution. This is proposed, and I understand that Councillor Kevin Lloydall wishes to speak. Councillor Lloydall.
Thank you, Worship. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before I put the motion to members, could I just draw your attention to page 10, item 5. It's this council resolves 2. There's a couple of amendments that need to be on record with regards to that particular paragraph. If I might read it out from 5.1 to 5.3, just bear with me. And I've disappeared somewhere. Somebody's doing something. Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. I'll read it from 5, which duly says, this council resolves to 5.1, take part in the consultation in the planning proposals and to make representations against the proposals as outlined in this motion. 5.2, this is where the changes come in. It simply says, write to and lobby our Member of Parliament, urging him to oppose these proposals and to circulate his replies to members. 5.3 is highlight his concerns over these proposals with the public and local residents. With those changes, Your Worship, I move the motion that reserve my comments for later. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Kevin Lloydall's proposed the motion. I understand we have a seconder. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I second the motion. I consider this very important that we respond to this proposal by the government, as I consider it will be very detrimental to the residents of this borough and this council itself. So I second.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. I understand now we're going to have a recorded style vote. So Mr. Tucker, would you do that, please?
Your Worship, before you do that, could I did say I reserve my comments for later in case anybody else had any comments.
Sorry, Councillor Lloydall, please.
No, that's all right. I'm within the protocols, am I?
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah. Okay. I said I reserve my comments till later. I think it's important that we do make some comments with regards to the planning white paper, because it's important that we make it really known to our residents and others what the proposals are and what's outlined in it. And when you consider, and it's in the paper itself, that the Local Government Association, which is we are a member of, has done its research, and just finally it looks at there are permission for more than 1 million homes that have not been built yet. Now there's an issue does that take account of the allocations of number of homes per year? Does that include that, or does it exclude it and it's on top of that? That's the important issue. It is. Furthermore, when you look at the Royal British Institute of Architects, they call the proposal shameful. And again, it's in the paper, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's doing nothing to guarantee delivery of affordable, well-designed and sustainable homes. The same organisation referred to it as next generation of slum houses. I think that's important because I've mentioned that at different committees. When we go for planning, we fought tooth and nail to get the national standards for space. Then we find that we can't do that because the inspector says we can't do that. And therefore, we're now building slum housing as far as I'm concerned. The other important thing is the 106 monies. And I'm sure members remember what 106 is for. When you talk about it can be used for schools, it can be development to build affordable homes and contribute to the infrastructure. If you think of the 3G pitch that's at Oadby, 106 money. And of course, what happens is that there is a particular minister that wants to do away with the 106 money, which to me is a backward step, in as much that we will then won't be able to do some of the things that we've done in the past. But maybe a coincidence that this particular Conservative minister is opposing to scrap it. It must be a coincidence that the property firms have donated more than 11 million to the Tory party since Boris Johnson became MP. People can draw their own conclusions on what that means. So it's important, Your Worship, that we fight this tooth and nail and get our MP on side and do what it says in the particular motion. Therefore, I move the motion to the vote. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We have a few speakers left. We have Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman and then Councillor John Boyce. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to support this, and I'm so pleased we've had the opportunity this evening of discussing it. I've had phone calls and emails from residents who have been concerned about the implications of this bill and white paper. So it's an important evening. Some residents realise that the right of residents to object to applications near them is going to go. They're going to centralise whatever's happening to the 106 monies. This is making what is already a bad situation even worse. For a long time now, I've felt extremely fed up of attending planning meetings to be able to do things on behalf of the residents, which the government have said we can no longer do. The amount of building and the amount of work that's going under permitted development is a mystery. This white paper, this proposed white paper, is the Tory party paying back its friends in the building industry for the support and the millions of pounds that it's given. If this was a third world country, anywhere else, we would be criticising it. This is something that's got to be stopped, and planning's got to be put back in the hands of local people. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman. Councillor John Boyce.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whilst I completely and utterly support the motion, I do have a slight problem in the wording on 5.3. This council resolves to 5.3 highlight its concerns over the proposal with the public and local residents. It's our concerns, 5.3, not the Member of Parliament. Yes, by all means, we should publish his reply. However, 5.3 relates to ours, therefore it is actually correct.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. I can't see any more raised hands. If everybody's finished speaking now, can we ask Mr. Tucker to go to the recorded vote, please?
Okay. If members could unmute their microphones whilst I take the vote, please. Just give everybody a second to do that. Okay. Councillor Adams.
4.
Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Bentley.
4.
Councillor Bolter.
4.
Councillor Boyce.
4.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
4.
Councillor Frank Broadley.
4.
Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Charlesworth.
4.
Councillor Dar.
4.
Councillor Robert Eaton.
4.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
4.
Councillor Gamble.
4.
Councillor Gattaraya.
4.
Councillor Joshi.
4.
Councillor Kaufman. Geoffrey Kaufman, sorry.
Oh.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Core.
4.
Councillor Kozlowski.
4.
Councillor Helen Lloydall,
4.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall,
4.
Councillor David Lloydall,
4.
and Councillor Morris,
4.
Councillor Ridley.
4.
Sorry, you've muted again.
That's unanimous, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. So we'll now move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 7, petitions, deputations and questions. To receive any petitions, deputations and or to answer any questions by members or the public in accordance with Rule 11, 12, 13 and 10 of Part 4 of the Constitution and the petitions procedure rules respectively. Are there any matters raised in this item? No hands raised, so we'll carry on to the next one, Mayor's announcements. There are no Mayor's announcements, and accordingly, the list of official mayoral and deputy mayoral engagements, all civic engagements have been suspended during the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you. We now go on to item 9, Leader's Statement. Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I say from the outset, I would rather like to encourage questions on not only this statement or future statements, excuse me. And in general, I would rather like that built into the Constitution at its next review. Okay, moving on. You will all know that the government at various times has suggested that we look at unitary status. The government would rather like us all to do it voluntarily. I can say that the 7 districts in Leicestershire have considered this, and there is no appetite to do this voluntarily. Indeed, we've been commissioning some work at looking at a solution should we be forced down this route. Whilst the obvious point is that most of us actually believe that the answer is we should stay as we are, there is a proposal, a potential for a north-south split. There is also a potential for an east-west split. I personally do not think east-west makes any sense whatsoever. I think north-south is marginally sensible, but only marginally. I think trying to find a solution to this which makes complete sense, I think, is exceptionally difficult. However, the districts have commissioned a further piece of work looking at north, south, east, west in a little more detail. That is not to commit any district to actually wanting or supporting this. This is simply so that we've got evidence and argument ready should we be forced down that route. Having said that, from September publication now through to November, the white paper is getting longer, and my guess would be we may not see that this year, in which case this will be an item which will recur but not necessarily go anywhere. I will keep you informed. The second thing I'd like to mention, you may have seen in the press, the A46 expressway, some people saying it's dead and hooray, we can forget it. As I was actually at the meeting where the A46 partnership presented their findings, that would be a complete misrepresentation. If you are looking at the A46, the idea of an expressway to the south and east of the city, from their strategic point of view, they are saying does not make sense. However, they also acknowledge that should growth and development take place to the east and south of the city, then it is absolutely clear that some form of infrastructure, e.g. a road, would be required to effectively go around the city. And in that sense, all that's happened is one funding route has been closed. The need has still been indicated and evidenced. So frankly, that's another one where, whilst it was the strategic growth plan which it formed part of was never intended about today or even tomorrow. It was about next week and next month in that sense. And so that will come back. The worst thing that could happen to the borough, in my view, would be the 20A junction on the M1, which is supported by the A46 partnership. And that would then deliver a significant amount of traffic to the east of the city, which frankly would have nowhere to go because we're already congested now. So these are long-term issues, but nonetheless, in reality, the evidence presented actually shows that we still have a need for infrastructure to the east and south. I will say something about COVID, but I think members may wish to raise that, so I'll say that then. Enforcement, you will notice that the council has taken action, and in fact, we've had to work quite extensively with the county to assist them in coming to a conclusion so that they will exercise their power under the appropriate act, which has resulted in 2 places being closed. There are other areas of concern which we are working on, and evidence and information from members, intelligence in that sense, is extremely vital. You will have received an email this evening asking for intelligence with regard to schools, and I would urge you to, via your SPOCs, provide evidence should you see it. And the same would apply to other establishments which may well have social gatherings which are too great. We do need to monitor, we do need to take action. So if I can ask us all to look at that. Meetings, the Mayor quite rightly said civic duties are currently suspended. Previously, I've said it would be nice if we could get back to proper meetings in November. Putting it simply, I do not believe we will get back to meetings this year. And it's easier to make that assumption now because frankly, any work we do to try and get back, I think is going to be irrelevant. So there will be no meetings other than virtual this year. I think we will have to take some view on the civic issues, bearing in mind that Christmas is coming up. But my guess would be the only thing we would allow this time before Christmas would be virtual meeting, virtual attendance. We will have to do some work and let members be aware of that, obviously, with consultation with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor. But my guess would be that would be the case as well. In terms of evidence that members have put in COVID, ASDA, you will have noticed in the press, is using a form of COVID marshal system. The reason they're doing that nationally is because basically we gave them such a hard time locally that they realized they actually have to do the job. And if they're going to do the job, they're going to do it nationally. So frankly, your officers should be applauded for our intelligence and their actions to ensure that ASDA cooperated fully. So with that, I will take questions.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. I understand Councillor Bolter wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, to the leader. We're in a difficult situation in the borough with social mixing, and we took the decision to close the parks at certain times. Could you give us the reasons why that decision was made and why the times were chosen? I myself had phone calls about it. I know other members have as well. We need to support the officers in that decision,
but we need the facts there to back that up. So perhaps you could let us know the facts, why it was chosen, the times chosen, and why they've now changed to 5 to 5, which I support. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. If I may, let me first of all give some background. This week, the infection rate, which is on the government's website, is 89, just slightly over 89 people per 100,000, and we're 22nd on their list of worst places in terms of infection rate. Interestingly, which is not good news, we're also extremely high in terms of deaths per 100,000. If you work it out, we have a death rate of 112 per 100,000, which is greater than any other country in the world, if you were to look at it that way. So it is obviously a serious problem. If you also look at the borough over a period of time, then we've always had a problem of young people gathering. Frankly, most of the time that is not a problem, but clearly in this this period of time, it is a problem. So we need to do something. We need to be seen to be doing something. Whilst I said we're now 22nd, if you go back a couple of weeks, we're actually second worst in the country. At that time, the incident management team, which is made up of county, us, public health, both locally and nationally, civil servants, and interestingly, the Cabinet Office, had a meeting, which is one of many regular meetings, and they looked at what they could offer the government to avoid this borough going into a fairly significant lockdown. We offered a number of things. We offered to leaflet, and we then did 13,000 houses. We offered and delivered on greater enforcement, and we also suggested that we could, as a response to the gathering issue, close and control the parks. And we had COVID marshals. Interestingly, COVID marshals are not widely used, largely because as we stand at this moment, the government have not yet issued their guidance about how to use them, but we're using them in a way that's sensible. The outcome of that suggestion to the government was that we did have additional restrictions. However, they accepted our offer, and therefore the parks were closed initially from 5 o'clock till 7 o'clock in the morning. Frankly, the issue in the morning was not that relevant. Therefore, we've gone now from 5 to 5. I spoke to Mrs. Court on Monday about an exit strategy, and that was discussed at the incident management team. And basically, when the numbers drop and we stop having local restrictions, the parks will then be reopened.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Kevin Lloydall, please.
Thank you, Worship. Again, it's a question with regards to Unitary. I heard today on the radio, I didn't quite get it all, but nationally the fiscal studies group that was talking about not spending money and saving it until we come out of this pandemic. I bring that down to the County Council with Nick Rushton as a Unitary about spending money. Whatever we do with this Unitary, it's costing the taxpayer a lot of money. So what I'm asking for, whether or not it's through the County Council or through a leader like John, is to find out what the costs are so far. Including consultants, all levied at this Unitary nonsense. If it's through a freedom of information, then that's what we should do. Perhaps the County Council could take it on board. But at this time, we should stop the spending on things like this so that that money could be used for supporting our businesses, supporting our making sure employment is protected and so on. Not waste it on something like this at this point in time. Secondly, if you don't mind, sorry, you can do both. Coming back to COVID and schools, really obviously read the article from the communications about school, about evidence. I've been to school, take my grandson, and yes, the evidence is there, but what type of evidence are we looking for? What we don't want to be doing is encourage people to say, perhaps take photos to say, here's the evidence here. So we've got to be very careful about what evidence, or give some guidance to what sort of evidence you want, in particular of that particular area of schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydall. Councillor Naveed Alam, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening to all councillors. My questions regarding the universities and students returning back to university, whether or not the council will be liaising with the Leicester University in particular, and whether or not to manage possible COVID outbreaks, etc., and whether or not the students, if there is any recorded cases of COVID, whether or not that would also be added to our statistics, considering students are now returning back to university.
Thank you. I presume you've finished. So let me go back to Councillor Lloydall first. This council, in terms of spend, I think it may have crept into four figures, but it is not a significant amount of money. And in fact, I'm sure Mr. Hines at some point will publish that amount. I'm perfectly happy with that. It is a very small amount. How much the county have paid, on the other hand, I have no idea. We've, as districts, have only looked at employing a single consultant who has experience and knowledge of how to do these things. And that's all we've done. The 7 of us have chipped in, so that's relatively small amounts. County, on the other hand, employed Ernst & Young, I think it was. Anyway, certainly one of the big firms who crunched some numbers, got them wrong, and county no doubt paid through the nose for it. But I'm afraid that would be a public, that would need to be a freedom of information request, and I don't think it's appropriate from a council. In terms of schools and evidence, you make a valid point. Taking photographs outside schools is almost certainly going to get you into trouble. Can I ask that Mrs. Fisher, we'll discuss it, if not this evening, then in the morning, and we'll get something out on that point. And then, Councillor Alam, putting it simply, Mrs. Fisher is on almost daily contact with the university. The university have produced a significantly large risk assessment and plan for COVID. And Mrs. Fisher and the university talk, as I say, on a very regular basis about that and any implications. As we stand at the moment, I'm unaware of the city of Leicester University having a problem.
Thank you, Councillor. Unless any of the speakers want to come back, there's no other hands raised. So if we're all clear, can we move to the next item? The next item is item 10, Identified Employment Land Supplementary Planning Document. And that's Mr. Thorpe to speak, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report relates to the adoption of the Identified Employment Areas Supplementary Planning Document. The draft document was discussed at Place Shaping Working Group on the 22nd of January and at a separate all-member briefing in April. In addition, 2 briefing notes were circulated to members, and all members were invited to respond with comments relating to any changes that they wish to be made. The draft Employment Site Supplementary Planning Document was amended to incorporate the comments that members made, and it was presented to PFD Committee on the 16th of June when it was approved for an 8-week period of public consultation. As a result of the public consultation, a number of further changes have been made to the document which are set out in the report. The starting point for the supplementary planning document is the adoptive policy in the Council's local plan that relates specifically to identified employment areas. The purpose of the supplementary planning document is to set out how the Council will apply this policy and put the meat on the bones of the policy, thus making it easier to understand and implement, to regularise the current position on some employment sites, and to enable a flexible but fair approach in the longer term. Importantly, the supplementary planning document recognises the need to provide a flexible approach in order to both protect and make sufficient provision for B-class employment land, which is a requirement of national planning policy, and to accommodate a healthy mix of uses in employment areas where it is appropriate to do so. The SPD provides a significant amount of detail in relation to base employment sites to ensure that this flexibility is applied in an appropriate, fair and consistent manner. It's recommended that the supplementary planning document is adopted. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Councillor Charlesworth, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't be talking about the document that's before us. I just wanted some clarity concerning my personal interest from the monitoring officer. I've declared a personal interest in the matter, but I think as long as that interest is not pecuniary, I can continue to take part in the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Charlesworth. Mr. Gill?
Yes, Councillor Charlesworth, that's what I said at the outset of the meeting when your interest was raised. It's a personal interest. You can continue to participate in the debate and also the vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Helen Lloydall, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased that Councillor Charlesworth is entitled to take part in this debate because I understand that this report is before us for us to approve. It is not here for us to adopt. That this report has gone out to consultation with the approval of PFD. And it went out for a consultation, an 8-week period up until Friday, the 21st of August. The consultees who responded, and there were 9 of them, and you can see their reports, their replies on, I believe, page 40. I'm just trying to check the actual page for you. It's page 45. It's right at the very back. No, it's 47. That's it, 47. As a result of these consultees and their issues that they have raised, the forward plans quite rightly have incorporated them into the document, and they have addressed all the issues, some of them minor, but some of them quite significant changes. Members also were consulted, and I myself put in quite a few changes to the document, which I would have hoped would have gone in the document. Unfortunately, not one of them was accepted to go into the document, but the consultees have been accepted to go into the document. And some of those were the same issues that I raised. It's amazing that mine weren't accepted, but the consultees were. I cannot understand why issues raised by consultees, public consultees, have been accepted and the document amended and incorporates the changes, but those which we put forward cannot be. And I understand that a motion has been put forward to amend bullet point 4 in the document. Whether Michael Charlesworth is still prepared to put that forward or not, but I cannot understand, and I would like it explained to me, why public consultees can have this document amended. We can't have an amendment put in, but we are being asked to vote to approve this amended document. Could somebody please explain that to me, as I do not understand the reasoning behind it? Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydall. Who's going to answer that? Who's going to answer Councillor Lloydall's question, please?
I can answer that, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Members will recall that when we were considering the draft document, we had at least one briefing session and 2 briefing notes were also...
Sorry, Your Worship, could I just interject there for 1 second? We've lost Samuel Ball, who's actually hosting the technical side of the meeting. Right. So could I request a short adjournment whilst we get Samuel back on? Because obviously, although we can continue, it's not going out to the public.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Tucker, we'll have a short adjournment. Perhaps, Mr. Tucker, you'll let us know when.
Will do.
To go again. Thank you.
I'll just say that we've now started. Okay, Linda.
Yep, okay, carry on. Just tell us when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Worship. The connection has now been re-established and the meeting is being live streamed once more.
Thank you. Do you want us to go back to Councillor Helen Lloydall?
Yes, please.
Carry on. Councillor Helen Lloydall, would you like to sort of briefly give us what you said before we drop the connection?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I basically, looking at the document, we have been asked to approve this supplementary planning document, which has gone out to consultation. It went out to members and it went out to consultees. Members sent in their comments, consultees sent in their comments, but the amendment that the councillors want to put forward to this document will not be accepted by the officers of the council, but the consultees' issues and amendments have been incorporated into the document, and you can see that quite clearly on page 47. It says there, taking account of the comments received during the public consultation, amendments have been made to the SPD document. Now, why is it that the consultees' amendments can be incorporated into the document, but the members' issues cannot, and their amendment cannot be incorporated into this document? Would somebody please explain that to me?
Somebody like to answer that for Councillor Lloydall, please?
Yes, Your Worship, I can answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe.
Members will be aware that in the preparation of the document, we held a couple of member briefings and also produced some briefing notes. Changes were made to the document as a result of that consultation with members, and those changes are set out in the briefing notes that were prepared at the time. However, I think an overriding concern of members is that some of the requirements in the SPD may have been too excessive. And we agreed at the time that we would consult with local agents to ascertain their view on indeed whether it was felt that the requirements of the document were too excessive. And those changes as a result of that consultation with those agents and indeed other consultees were made to the document. Just to give a couple of examples of the changes that were made as a result of the consultation with local agents, in relation to paragraph 3.40, it was suggested that copies of advertisements should be provided. That's now been removed because the local agent said that some adverts may not be available at the time, particularly if they were advertised online. In reference to a further bullet point which required details of interested parties to be provided, it was suggested that may, although it didn't specifically say, but it may lead to some personal details being submitted. So that's been amended so that there's no reference to that. And there's a final example over the page on paragraph 3.42, there are some requirements for robust evidence to be provided, and the word robust has been removed. So those changes have been made, as I say, as a result of consultation with local agents, which we agreed to do as part of the consultation process.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Councillor Lloydell, would you like to come back at all?
Yes, I would like to come back, Your Worship. Thank you very much. And I thank you for that explanation, Adrian, but it still does not answer the question. You've incorporated some of the changes, you've incorporated some of the amendments, but there are still some amendments that members wanted to make, especially to bullet point 4. And I cannot still understand why you won't make those amendments. It's quite acceptable for the other amendments to be made. It should be acceptable for this amendment to be put forward to this full council and voted on whether or not they are prepared to accept it or not. And I don't understand why you won't allow this amendment to go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydell. Mr. Thorpe, do you want to answer that?
Yes, can Councillor Lloydell just clarify which particular amendment she's referring to, please?
Yes, you have the amendment, I believe, which was sent to you earlier today by Councillor Charlesworth. I don't know whether Councillor Charlesworth wants to come in on that.
I have got him listed as a speaker, but after you, Councillor Lloydell.
Right, so I can hand over then to Councillor Charlesworth and then come back to Mr. Thorpe if it is appropriate. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Charlesworth, would you like to speak now? You need to unmute.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just getting the amendment up on my other screen. Perhaps if I go through it with Mr. Thorpe to see what he believes has been changed and what is still extant in the document. Forgive me, this is taking some time. Oh, here we are, right. There's the headline, proposals to change the use of land, blah, blah, blah. Will not have an overly adverse impact. We'd like the word overly included. Is that, well, I mean, I'm told we can't put an amendment. So is this all academic?
Mr. Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the wording that both Councillor Lloydell and Councillor Charlesworth are referring to is the wording that appears on page 27 of the paper. Now, that wording is an extract from the Council's adopted local plan. So in putting forward a request for the wording on in the box on page 27 of the document is actually putting forward a request to change the wording in the adopted local plan in policy 25 on identified employment sites. Now, unfortunately, we can't change the wording in the local plan that's adopted. As members know, the local plan was prepared over a long period of time. It's been through public examination and been approved by the planning inspector. So we can't change the wording in that policy. However, we have talked about the wording in that policy. Indeed, in the preparation of this document and the briefing sessions that I referred to earlier that we held. And the changes that we made during that time is actually in relation to the wording of the supplementary planning document itself. In my introduction, I referred to the purpose of SPDs to give more explanation behind the policy and to put the meat on the bones of the policy. So I believe, and I set out in an email earlier today to Councillor Charlesworth, that the additions that we've made to the other parts of the document in relation to each of the bullet points that appears in the policy actually does respond to members' concerns and actually provides a lot more flexibility and a lot more guidance both to the council as decision makers and to applicants and agents when submitting an application.
You'll have to forgive me, Mr. Thorpe, but you said being part of the local plan means we can't fundamentally change any of the wording, but you've just gone on to describe a process you used where you have actually changed the wording in the SPD. That is all we are trying to do tonight.
If I may reply, Lord Asher.
But please, Mr. Thorpe, carry on.
So to be clear, the wording that we can't change is the wording in the box at the top of page 27, which is the policy that appears in the local plan. It's been copied into the supplementary planning document. We can change, and indeed we have changed, the wording in the whole of the rest of the supplementary planning document, both prior to the public consultation, as a response to the briefings we held with members, and as a result of the public consultation itself.
So you're referring to the box which says policy 25?
That's correct. Policy 25 is the policy that appears in the local plan.
But you've already changed wording in that, Mr. Thorpe. You said the word robust had come out.
The word robust has come out from paragraph 3.43 on page 17 of the supplementary planning document. So paragraph 3.43, which begins where an applicant is seeking to demonstrate that the continued B-class use employment is no longer appropriate. There's a number of bullet points that fall under the rest of that paragraph, and they began in the consultation draft with the word robust, and that has been removed.
Right. Doesn't make it much clearer, I'm afraid. Like Mrs. Lloydell has already said, we have been in this process for the best part of, 8 or 9 months now, and we've been at the meetings and we've made our comments well known about the situation. I've no problem with the core sites. The base sites, I just think we're making it extraordinarily difficult, and I know you're trying to build in as much flexibility as possible for people who run businesses, and it would have been nice, well, I'm sure you did, but did you get any responses from people who've got businesses up there? I know you mentioned the marketing people had come back and made a couple of comments, but it would be interesting to see, I've seen the comments, if there were any, from people who run businesses up there.
The comments that we got back were the comments that are set out in the report. We did widely promote the consultation on this document to the business industry through for example, our business newsletter and through our social media. So it was widely promoted, but unfortunately, the response that we received was limited.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Just final comment. We're heading into a very, very difficult economic time now, and this council has got to be proactive and react in a way that meets the needs of all the people in the borough, whether they work here, live here, or whatever. And I just want that to be as a smoother operation as possible, because, you know, there's going to be a lot of redundancies, a lot of people laid off, a lot of businesses going bust. The town centres now are looking very, very worrying. And, you know, we need fit for purpose buildings. And at the moment we don't have them. And I don't think we're addressing the needs that are there now and will be in the next 6 months. And finally, I must apologise to Mr. Gill. I misheard you at the start of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Helen Lydall, did you want to come back? I have 2 more speakers, but I didn't know if you had anything else to add. I can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I do. I would like to come back. I agree with all that Councillor Charlesworth has said. And I am very concerned that this document seems to have been a huge exercise which is now expecting us as councillors to rubber stamp. I myself do not feel that my input has been taken into account. I agree wholeheartedly that the core identified employment area is correct. I do not agree that the officers have it right with the base identified employment land, especially where Kenilworth Drive in Oadby is concerned. I do not feel that there has been enough done in this document to meet the needs of that site. And I believe that that site should have been removed from the base employment site into the release employment site. And officers may have demonstrated a will not to do that. And I feel very frustrated that we've got this document before us, which we have taken at least 9 months now going over, and we still have not got a satisfactory document. And I do not feel at the moment that I can support this going through. And we're being asked to vote on it. We're being asked to approve it. And I don't feel at the moment that I can. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Bentley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've listened to what was said before, and I must say I completely agree with what's been previously said. I finding this more and more confusing as we're going along. The main problem here, as far as I see it, is the Kenilworth Drive industrial estate, including Mandeville Road, and the bullet point 4 on pages 31, 32 and 33. I believe, and I have said myself in the consultation we had, and I don't believe that many of my remarks were taken into account either, I believe that it is very onerous on any applicant who wants to have change of use on that industrial estate. The things they have to go through and the money they're going to have to spend is not appropriate for small businesses, and the amount of time it takes for them to actually do what they need to do to gain the evidence that the council needs is basically going to stop them from doing it in the first place. The Oadby Industrial Estate, I know very well. I worked there for a great many years, and I don't believe that a lot of it is actually fit for use, which is why the change of use applications are coming in. And I believe we should support some of those changes of use. But this supplementary document was supposed to allow us to do that, and I don't believe it does. I don't also understand why we are being asked to approve this document and we can't make any changes on it. I understand we've already adopted the local plan. I know all about that. But we are being asked to approve a document here. We're asked to consultate on it. It went out for consultation. It went to other people and changes were made. But as Councillor Lydall says, we're not allowed to make any changes now. I want to know why we can't make any changes now. But one of the main things I do want to know is, what are the consequences to the local plan if we do not accept this document? Is it detrimental to the local plan, or can we just say we don't agree with this, we will not adopt it until further consultation is made and looking into it? Can I have that question answered, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Mr. Thorpe, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, I can answer that question, Your Worship. And I'll start with the last question in terms of whether it's detrimental to the local plan. Clearly, it provides a lot more evidence that sits behind the policy in the plan. I just want to try and make an important point here. The policy in the local plan is what sets the guidance as to what is required in relation to a planning application. And I think it's what members feel is potentially too strict in terms of what's set out in the policy. It's actually the supplementary planning guidance that provides the flexibility to enable people putting in planning applications to have them considered in terms of what's set out in that document. So the purpose of the supplementary planning document is actually to make it easier for people that are submitting applications, not to make it more strict. And I think that that's a really important point to make. For example, in terms of marketing, the policy talks about somebody wanting to change the use of the premises to market it for 12 months. The supplementary planning document sets out when it would be reasonable for it to be marketed for 6 months. So I just don't want members to make a decision without having the whole of the information before them. And my view is that actually what the supplementary planning document does is puts more information on the table that makes it easier for applicants submitting applications, and certainly gives us more information when we're looking at determining a planning application. Just in response to the comment about members not being allowed to make changes to the document, that isn't the case. There was a significant opportunity to make changes to the document prior to it being considered by PFD for public consultation. And indeed, in response to those briefings, changes were made. Changes could have been made to the document before it was approved for public consultation, but it was approved by PFD Committee for Consultation. And strictly speaking, what we're looking at in this meeting is the responses to the public consultation that have been received, because the document has previously been approved by PFD Committee. Also, if members did have concerns that their opinions and views hadn't been taken into account previously, then of course they could have submitted responses through the public consultation period as well.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Councillor Bentley, would you like to come back?
Yes, I don't believe I heard the response regarding any consequences to the local plan if we do not adopt this document.
Could I interject there, Your Worship? The position is that if this document is not adopted, then you are required to apply the policy as it stands without any of the additional issues in this SPD. As Mr. Thorpe has said, the purpose of the SPD is to some extent to make it easier for people to understand what it is that they are required to do. He also says there's some changes. So the changes for the marketing is from 12 months in certain circumstances to 6 months. If you don't adopt this policy, then you're bound to accept the policy as it stands with a 12-month period of marketing. And if you were to go outside of that, you'd be outside the policy. As Adrian has said on a number of occasions, the policy document cannot be altered at this stage. The local plan is a living document, and if you're suggesting that you're not happy with this policy, then it needs to be raised as part of the review process of the local plan and to be picked up by the planning policy team at a future date.
Thank you, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Bentley. Councillor John Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the officers have done almost an heroic job of trying to make what is actually the local plan policy work locally in a particular area. And yes, it probably could be improved, but then again, frankly, the answer is we probably can't do that until we renew the local plan. And bearing in mind what has just been said by Mr. Gill, because I was going to ask what were the effect of turning it down, I see no other option than moving the report.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Helen Lloydall, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, for allowing me to come back. And having listened to Adrian, I can see where he is coming from, that what they are trying to do is to soften the policies which are too harsh in the document, in my opinion. And I can see that you are trying to do that. I still don't think it goes far enough. I would like to ask a question though, Adrian, please. You said that in the bullet point 4, the marketing, you've taken out the word robust, they must provide evidence. The marketing, a minimum of 12 months, you have taken advice from the consultees and said you have reduced that to 6 months. I can't see that on page 47 of the issues raised by the consultees. Is that actually down in writing somewhere, or is that just something that you have said?
It's certainly the response that we had from a particular local agent, which was Picot and Crone, and their view was, in terms of buildings that are stood empty for a long period of time, 12 months of marketing wasn't necessary, and 6 months would be sufficient. And that has been clarified in the report. In paragraph 3.36.
3.36. Right, I can see that's on page 32. Every 6 months, is that,
it's on my page 31, but yes, paragraph 3.36.
And that goes over onto 32, that it's been
That's
changed
correct.
for minimum of 6 months. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Helen Lloydall. Councillor Kevin Lloydall, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is one of my pet things with regards to planning. I think we established some time ago, when we talk about forward plans and planning, there's a conflict between the two because they don't talk to each other. And an example of that is quite clear, isn't it? When we have the place shaping and myself looking at adopting the national standards for space. And each time I asked the question, yes, we've adopted it. Yes, we've adopted it. No matter when it came up, I asked for clarification and they said, yes, yes, yes. I'm not an expert, so I rely on the professionals to ensure that that is, we're empowered to put that in place so we don't, as it suggests in the petition or the motion, that we're not building slum hovels in this borough, which we are, because we're allowing it to happen. And it goes to planning, first planning comes up, space, no, we can't do that. The inspector says, you haven't got enough evidence to prove it. That never was brought up at the forward plans, it weren't brought up at place shaping, nobody mentioned that at all. So what's the point? What was the point of all of that? So you get disappointed, don't you? You get to think, hang on a minute, my confidence is starting to wane in this particular area, because you think you've got somewhere, the professionals have got it, they will deal with it, and then suddenly find it goes to planning. No, you can't do it because the inspector said. I find that quite offensive, quite honestly. it is. And it's a status of this document. What is it? Because if you've got a planning guide X, and then all of a sudden you say, well, X is a bit too rigid, so we'll go out on consultation and we'll do a supplementary planning document to soften it. Does that mean that the planning document X is wrong? Because I would have thought that would have been the best place to put these things in. If you've got a business head on it, you'd build it into that and say, all these things will make sure that we can help businesses, we can help people go along and everything else. But we end up spending all this money on doing supplementary documents all the time, then referred back. The problem I have sometimes is that when members then put something forward, they use these documents to beat you up and say, you voted for that at that meeting long ago, so you can't do it. You can't do this. I'm talking as an amateur from a planning point of view. I don't understand all of it. I do understand a lot of it, but I find it's all contradiction for me. And it's like the Kenilworth Drive in the release of employment land. When I read the definition of that, Kenilworth Drive seems to fit it, but now it's going to go in there. And the argument is, well, if you put it in there, you're going to have to look for other employment land. Why? Because it said in that document, portfolio can be released for other uses. It could be, the other uses could be a better employment property. It could. So I'm not quite sure where we all go from this. And I thought, well, when I looked at it's got to be adopted, taking the leader's point and Mr. Gill's point, I think I was going to say, well, look, I don't want to. I'm going to vote against it because I just it's so erratic, it's so contradictory, and I've got no confidence in the fact that forward plans and planning talk together, and we get the best deal possible as members say we want to put this in, we want to put that in. If the answer is yes, you're going to do it, we rely on the professionals to do it, but then the planners go along and say you can't do it because the inspector says. I want to put it on record as well from the inspector's point of view. We want the name and the contact details of the inspectors. Whether I can have them or not, I don't know, as long as it's on record that I've asked for those details, because I would like to be able to publish those details so it can go out to the members of the public. So you've got any problems with this, you write to the inspector, because they are faceless bureaucrats who are not accountable to anybody, but we are. But when we try and do things, we get the planning actually stops you from doing it. And the national state space criteria is a good example of that. But I want it to make it easier for businesses to thrive and whatever, especially at this time. So I just wanted to put it on record that I'm not happy with it. I think we need, in the future, when we can, have a really strong debate about whether forward plans and planning are fit for purpose. And I mean that in the greatest respect for people like me who probably don't understand it properly. So I need to be able to get it into my head if I'm doing the right thing, but I get frustrated when I try and do the right thing. I then get beaten to death with these documents and I can't do it because I do appreciate and respect what officers are doing, especially now. They're doing a splendid job. They're keeping the service going, and we don't want people to be think that we're ungrateful for what they're doing, because they are doing a sterling job in the circumstances. That's my rant, if you like, but I feel so strongly about the fact that we have the power in planning? You decide. I don't think we have. So, and then you have to ask yourself the question, why do we have a planning committee? I've said enough. Thank you very much. Respectful to everybody. But I think that's how I feel at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd-Hall. Councillor Bolter, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's not a perfect document. I agree with that, and but it's better than the existing document. So we've got some movement. Mine's a technical point. If you look at recommendations on page 11, it says identify an employment plan, a supplementary planning document set out as Appendix 1 be adopted. Appendix 1 is the maps. Appendix 2 is the document. So what you're supposed to be voting for, the maps of the document, or both. Because if we go to the vote, on the recommendations, all we're doing is adopting the maps.
Your Worship, if I can respond to that. Appendix 1 is on page 17 of the law report pack. It's a little bit obscured by the colours on the front page, but Appendix 1 is the supplementary planning document, and then the supplementary planning document itself has 2 appendices within it, one being the maps and one being the statement of consultation, I do believe.
I must disagree. On page 35, it says quite at the top of the page, Appendix 1.
Yes, that's Appendix 1 of the supplementary planning document, but the report is referring to Appendix 1 of the report, which is the whole supplementary planning document.
Well, how come we've got 2 Appendix 1s on the same report?
Well, Appendix 1 is the supplementary planning document that members are being asked to adopt this evening, and then there's within that supplementary planning document, there's 2 appendices, Appendix 1, which is the maps, and Appendix 2, which is the consultation statement.
Okay, well, I find that rather confusing. We've got all appendix with the same numbers on. It should be 1, 2 and 3, in my humble opinion, but there you are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolter. Councillor Charlesworth, please.
Hello.
Can you clarify what your amendment is? Are we still going ahead with that amendment?
Well, I'm told it's not allowed. It's not within the remit. No amendment is allowed, I'm told.
Let me ask Mr. Gill.
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship. The amendment is seeking to amend the policy, not the supplementary planning document. And as we've already stated, the policy can only be reviewed through the local plan process.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Charlesworth?
Yes, and I accept the monitoring officer's advice.
Thank you, Councillor Charlesworth. Councillor David Lloydall, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's in regard to the marketing 3.36 through to 3.40, so that bullet point 4 again. In terms of the bullet points 3.39, for example, we're talking about marketing strategies being prepared by a suitable, qualified professional. I work in the industry of training suitable, qualified professionals who actually own their own businesses and are suitably qualified. So are we talking about getting an external party involved, which is exceedingly expensive to actually do so when you're talking about agencies and marketing, especially with local, who better than the person running that business in Oadby and Wigston Borough. I do think that the 6 months in this day and age, in this new normal, as it were, is again excessive, because we need to be moving a lot faster in getting people businesses in places that are empty and employing people that need jobs, because there are so many redundancies out there. So why can we not take this down to the 3 month as suggested for offices in the supplementary document? Why can't we not be a bit more flexible with this 6 months and the suitable qualified professional?
Mr. Thorpe?
With regard to the suitable qualified professional, I would consider that to be a local agent. And indeed, if someone were marketing their property, they would need to appoint or employ a local agent anyway, and they would be able to draw up a marketing strategy. If I can also draw members' attention to paragraphs 1.15 and 1.16 on page 20. That refers to what might be a material consideration, and it gives 2 examples, one being a downturn in the UK or global economy, and the other being the planning history of a site. So both of those would be material considerations in the determination of the planning application. So, for example, given the current downturn in the economy, when Development Control Committee were considering such a proposal, it might be felt that a material consideration would be that marketing for 3 months would be sufficient.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Councillor David Lloyd, do you want to come back at all, or you're okay with that?
Just thank you very much for Mr. Thorpe. Thank you, Your Worship. It's nice to know that they the COVID can be taken into account. So we are saying that the 3 to 6 or 12 months is on a case by case and a exterior circumstances or extenuating circumstances. So it can be brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Broadley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question for Mr. Gill, really. Should anyone associated with the consultees have declared an interest in this item?
Could you just clarify what it is that you're making comment on, please, Councillor Broadley?
Well, I'm on the, I forget what page it is now, I've closed the paper. Mr. Thorpe said some of the changes have been made because of the consultees, that their points that they put forward. So what I'm asking is, if anyone is associated with the consultees, should they have declared an interest in this item before tonight's meeting?
Theoretically, yes, but it would again have been like Councillor Charlesworth. It would be a personal interest, which would enable them to continue in the debate and also vote in any subsequent motion.
Thank you. You're right, Councillor Broadley. Do you want to come back at all?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the end of my remarks, I will remind you that I've actually moved the motion, and therefore it would be nice if we could have a seconder and vote on it. I'd like to pick up on Councillor Kevin Lloydell's remarks, most of which I actually agree with. The problem is simple. We are currently required to produce a local plan. The local plan has to balance the needs of the borough across a number of areas, including employment. But we start from where we are. We don't start from where we want to be. And clearly Kenilworth Drive, as an example, has given us a problem, I don't know, for at least for 20 years. That's how long I've been around. Therefore, you know, I started with black hair. It's pretty obvious it's a problem. The problem with the planning system is actually the inspectorate. We have a local plan, we make a decision against that local plan. The inspectorate basically is governed by government. And if it decides that it wants to encourage something, then you will normally lose whatever appeal there is where you've tried to do the opposite. And I think that's a problem. But the moment the inspectorate make a decision, it's a bit like the courts. The moment they've made a decision, you're in trouble because basically that becomes your baseline. And I think that's a problem. Nonetheless, we are where we are. It's not, I think the officers, as I said earlier, have done a superb job in trying to make this as flexible as possible. And apart from Councillor Bentley, who's about to speak, can I suggest we go to the vote?
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Bentley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Although I'm not completely happy with everything in this document, as Mr. Gill explained, if we don't adopt it, we have to move back to the actual wording in the local plan, which is a lot harsher. So for that reason, and that reason alone, I will second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. So we have a mover and a seconder. So Mr. Tucker, can we do the recorded style vote, please? Can everybody unmute themselves, please? Thank you. Mr. Tucker?
Okay. Councillor Adams?
Abstain.
Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Bentley.
4.
Councillor Bolter.
4.
Councillor Boyce.
4.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
Reluctantly 4.
Councillor Frank Broadley.
He lost.
Where is he?
4.
Oh, is that?
Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Charlesworth.
Abstain.
Councillor Dar.
4.
Councillor Robert Eaton.
Abstain.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
4.
Councillor Gamble.
4.
Councillor Gattaraya.
He's muted.
4.
Councillor Joshi.
4.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Core.
4.
Councillor Kozlowski.
4.
Councillor Helen Lloydall.
Abstain.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
Abstain.
Councillor David Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Morris.
Abstain.
And Councillor Ridley.
4.
Okay, Your Worship, so I've 18 votes for and 6 abstentions, none against.
Thank you. That concludes this evening's business.